gives me pause that if those folks, the other 4% of those folks that were terminated would now be permanent employees, and does that make that termination process significantly more arduous?
Madam Chair, Senator, that's a really good question. And so I do personnel as an attorney, not for the state. I've been on the other side of what the state Personnel Act is as a supervisor. And what I will say is that whether you terminate someone at 1 month or you terminate someone at 8 months, there is no such thing as terminating someone for no reason. I just want to make that really clear. You always have to have some sort of a reason. The law doesn't require that you have a reason, but because a filing could be made to the HRB, the Human Rights Bureau, a filing could be made of discrimination. As an attorney, it's always my recommendation to the employer that you have to have a reason, because you have to be able to show that that reason wasn't discriminatory. So what happens right now at the end of 1 year is, yes, there is more due process. And this due process would be applicable at 6 months in this case. So it's not more arduous. It may take a little more effort and a little more time, but you always have to have a reason for why someone's being terminated. Would you like an explanation of what the process is?
Madam Chair and Senator, I'd like an explanation of the delta, the differential between probationary and non-probationary terminations, because this could have an impact on how I'm going to vote on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator. I'm going to let the expert witness answer that question.
Oh, and who are you, expert witness?
Madam Chair and Senator, my name is Lindsay Hurst. I am currently serving as the Executive Vice President of CWA 7076. We represent state employees at 13 state agencies. It's about 2,700 positions. I am also a state employee of over 10 years. So that's who I am. And then to get back to your question, so once someone is off probation, well, let me back up just a moment. Employees are evaluated a couple times a year. Okay, so at the beginning of the year, and this is for probationary and off probation, there is a meeting where you set goals for the year and expectations of the job. There is an interim evaluation halfway through the year, where the manager and the employee will sit down and see, okay, how's it going? Where are we at? What needs improvement? And where are you meeting expectations? And then at the end of the year, there's a final evaluation. So essentially, that continues throughout an entire career. And if a career status employee who's off probation is having trouble, is not meeting expectations, they are given the opportunity to improve. But the same thing is true typically when you're on probation. So if someone's having a little trouble getting the hang of something, they're going to be told at their interim evaluation and given the opportunity to improve. So that's for essentially job duties. If there is a different type of situation where there's unprofessional conduct or something like that, depending on how egregious it is, then the employer can proceed with disciplinary action through those processes.
And Madam Chair, Ms. Hurst, does all that accelerate with the 6-month timeline? Instead of 6 months evaluating, 3 months, etc.?
Madam Chair and Senator, the time period to be evaluated and have your interim evaluations, yes, that will accelerate a little bit. But essentially, the same process applies.
Last question, Madam Chair. Senator, what prompted the need for this?
Madam Chair and Senator, excellent question. I appreciate it. Basically, we are losing. Uh, let me give you a little background. In FY24, one third, 34% of new hires did not complete probation. Of those, 75% chose to resign. During probation, workers are not able to access the full benefits of state employment, including alternative work schedules, fitness and wellness time, 2 additional personal leave days, and union membership. And where this, let me give you an example, a brief example. Alternative work schedules are really critical, especially for employees that are coming in from a previous career, where they're going to expect a little bit of flexibility in scheduling. On probation, employees who are not shift workers are required to work a strict 8 to 5 schedule with a 1 hour lunch. A lot of employees who are commuting to Santa Fe for their positions or commuting into Albuquerque from rural New Mexico, this means that they may have additional time before and after work. They may not be able to pick their children up on time. We have lost people because they could not leave at 4:30 to make it in time to pick their child up from daycare during the probationary period. So those are the reasons that this is important.
Madam Chair, Senator, and Ms. Hurst, you may have lost me with that flexible schedule. It's because I can't get my constituents can't get a live person to answer the telephone in state government. I cannot tell you the number of times I have the constituent coming to me pleading with a problem. They have called Secretary of State's office, Tax and Rev, you name the agency. We just can't get anybody to call us back. And that's got to change. Madam Chair and Senator, we need a little customer service in this state. And from the feedback that I get from my constituent on so many occasions, if I call and I say, this is State Representative Larry Scott, I'm from District 62 in Hobbs, here's my problem. The problems invariably are solved in a day or two. I have to get involved. And that's wrong. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator.
Madam Chair, could I just respond, or would you rather? It's
It
okay.
was just,
Yep,
it
go
wasn't a question,
Yep.
it was a statement.
Yep.
Senator Block.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some of those concerns that Senator Scott has, but I think I kind of like this, and I need you to convince me here on a couple things. 6 months. You mentioned training. Training is critical. Madam Chair, and I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. No, did you say, no? Did you say Linda? I know you. Oh, Lindsay. Lindsay, you're a state worker, right? And where do you work?
Madam Chair and Senator, I am currently an employee of the New Mexico Environment Department.
Okay. Madam Chair, Lindsay, do you do human resources or training in that department?
Madam Chair and Senator, no, I do not
Okay,
do
that's
human
fine.
resources. I do training
Oh,
of other employees. A lot of employees do.
okay. Madam Chair, Lindsay, are you like maybe the head trainer, instructor in that department?
Madam Chair and Senator, no, I'm not.
Okay. Well, Madam Chair, Lindsay, you're going to have to answer these training questions anyway. And I understand it's just the environment department. So when a new person gets hired in the environment department, depending on what job they have to have, what percentage of those employees have training that takes less than 6?
Madam Chair and Senator, to be clear, I am here today speaking in my capacity as a union officer. I cannot speak for the Environment Department. In answer to your question, it depends on the position. So, and it depends on the complexity of the position. So, for our professionals, our environmental scientists, etc., training can be ongoing. A lot of times there are processes put in place so that newer employees who are doing the work are still meeting expectations, where they're paired with more senior employees for peer review of work.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess what I'm trying to find a comparison between how we did it in the Air Force versus how you guys are doing in the state. Because you come in the Air Force, you go through basic training, or you go through a commissioning program, then you go off to a tech school and you get certified level 3 or whatever it is. And there's a lot of schools in the Air Force that are, well, less than 6 months and more than 6. So the reason why I ask that is because based on the amount of training you need, 6 months is a tough time to kind of gauge if that employee is a right fit or not, if they're progressing through the training. That's where I was going with that. And I know you don't know the entire state government when it comes to that, and I was just trying to kind of get a gauge of your department where you've been working for 10 years as a trainer. Um, so in the bill, Madam Chair, can you go back and just tell us why are people not getting through the 6 months? Is it because of a flexible schedule?
Madam Chair and Senator, it's a number of things. I mean, some people resign of their own accord for unknown reasons, but we have heard a lot of feedback that the scheduling is causing a lot of challenges, and so that's our primary example we bring up.
Okay, thank you. So, Madam Chair, if it's 180 days or 365, it's really not going to matter, is it? Because the job's the job, and if you don't get the flexible scheduling, you, you're not going to make it through the probationary period. Because if that's the number one answer, I don't know if it is, but if that's the number one answer, the flexible schedule, it doesn't matter if you have a 180-day probationary period or a year long. Is that a fair assumption?
Madam Chair, Senator, I think it is a fair assumption to say whether it's 6 months, 180 days, or a year, that there's going to be some folks who are just going to. I do not. I don't think what we're saying is that the flexible schedule is the only reason, because a flexible schedule doesn't mean that there's not going to be workforce there during the 8 to 5, right? A
Right.
flexible schedule means that and an employee never automatically gets a flexible schedule. The supervisor has a responsibility, and the head of the agency, to make sure that there's adequate personnel there to answer the phone, to review emails, to accept people who are walking into the agency. But think about how it was in the military, for example. What I find with individuals who are on probation is I do kind of know what their work ethic is by the first 3 months, quite honestly. If you don't know what their work ethic is and what their ability to learn the material that they're being trained in by that time period, I think you're just not paying. And so what happens though is that for a whole year, they feel like they're not really part of the team, that they're not really part of what the agency is doing. And making them part of the team, giving them access to a flexible schedule if it's possible, giving them access to the ability to have 30 extra minutes for exercise during their lunch break, or any of those other benefits, the additional time off, um, the accrual of personal leave, it does in fact make a difference.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would agree with that. And where I was going is, in my opinion, if you're training, you get hired on January 1st. you have to go through and get certified on a bunch of different tasks. And it takes you 2 or 3 months. You might be a little bit of a slow learner, and that might not be an adequate gauge to say, all right, I don't think you're going to really do well the next 3 months before we can you. Um, but then again, you could be a fast learner and do really well, and you're going to excel. I was really on this. I was trying to support it based on the amount of time it takes somebody to get trained, get certified, get up to speed, and be productive in the office doing the mission, and then boom, they're good. Because quite frankly, I don't think 6 months is good enough. Because in the Air Force, if you're I'll just say, like for me, as a missile launch officer, going through almost a year of school, learning the weapon system, time you get to the unit and you're on alert, you got to meet all these milestones of training, and it takes a while. And if you don't do good, you're gone. Um, which yeah, you don't need to be in that job. So I guess I'm giving the worker the benefit of the doubt that 6 months is probably not enough time to really learn how the office works, get all the training, then you're starting to do the job. That's where I was going with that. But Senator Scott's concerns, I mean, I think we all hear that, they're all working from home or something, or a lot of people are. I don't know, but no one's answering the phone, whether they're at home or work, and no one gets back to you. That's a big frustration in government. No one ever responds back to you. So I think the feds, Madam Chair, Senator, it's a 1-year probation with the federal government. Is that correct? Just say yes.
Madam Chair, I think the
It
answer is
is.
yes, Senator.
Okay. And I think that matches up pretty well. I think 1 year is a fair amount of time, but quite frankly, I think some of these people are going to be gone because they just they don't want to do something. They're not getting their way on something. They're going to be gone anyway. How do you terminate an employee, Madam Chair or Senator, after 1 year if they're not performing?
Madam Chair, Senator, I want to just really quickly speak up on behalf of state employees. I spent over 25 years working with state employees, and I just have to say that I found very few that didn't do the job that they were hired to do. They're dedicated people, they're our families, they're our neighbors, and they do, for the most part, come on. I have had to terminate people. I will admit that. But for the most part, they really do their job. And so, um, do,
Repeat it.
yeah, thank
Yep.
you. I'm sorry. I
That's
just got
okay.
caught up on,
So,
I don't want
Madam
to
Chair,
bash.
Senator, I know the vast majority of these workers are good. We all know that. There's some non-performing. Got it. So after 1 year, how do you terminate after a year?
Thank you. Sorry, I lost track of my thoughts. Madam Chair, Senator, so a notice of contemplated action would be issued, and then the employee would have, and that's just to say, like, we're notifying you that we're contemplating taking this action. Call it an NCA. And then the employee has, I believe, 11 days to respond to that and to request, I believe, a hearing or an opportunity to meet with their supervisor. And then the process, can go further, but the notice of contemplated action is the first.
Okay. So, Madam Chair, Senator, you can still terminate somebody after the probationary.
Madam Chair, Senator, you can still terminate somebody up through that probationary period, but you still have to give them a notice that you're
Right.
contemplating. You know what I mean? You still have to go through some of that.
Yep. So, Madam Chair, Senator, that you still have to go through the due process of whatever that
No,
is.
Madam Chair, Senator, no, due process doesn't assign to individuals that are on probation.
No, Senator, Madam Chair, after 1 year, they have to go through some type of due process to get terminated. Is
That's
where I was
correct.
going. Within the probationary period, it's pretty quick, I would imagine.
Madam Chair, Senator, it is quick.
Okay.
There is no true due process that connected to a probationary employee.
Madam Chair, Senator, do you have the statistics if an employee can't make it through training or whatever it is, Is that grounds for dismissal within the probationary period? And do you see that? Is that something you guys keep track of?
Madam Chair, Senator, that does happen at times, right? For example, if you're going through the police academy and you can't pass it, then your job is there based upon the fact that you're going to be a police officer. If you can't attain being a police officer, then you would be terminated, and there would be there would be just cause for you to be terminated um, because you weren't able.
Okay. Madam Chair, Senator, I'm leaning towards supporting it because I think it should match up with kind of what the feds have. You can still terminate people if they're not performing by going through the due process after they've had probationary period. I'm good with that. 6 months is not a lot of time because, in my opinion, sometimes life happens in 6 months where there's something that goes on in a person's life, and they got to take 2 weeks off unpaid leave or something to take care of an issue. So, um, I just think 6 months is probably not a good gauge to see where this person is. So, thanks for answering the questions, and I look forward to hearing any other discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Charlie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator. Why not just offer the benefits up front without having to get through the probationary period while still having a probationary?
Madam Chair, Senator, I think I'm not sure if you read in the FIR, but those benefit, the additional time, the leave, those are determined by rules. And so they could in fact be changed, but they've been the way that they are in rules for many, many, many. And I can't answer why the State Personnel Office hasn't changed that so that they are available during probation, but they did make it very clear in the FIR that shortening the probationary period is not, doesn't stop those benefits or confer those benefits. What confers it and doesn't confer it is the term of what you are, probationary or non-probationary.
Madam Chair and Senator, thank you for that. The workforce is changing. It has changed. I've run several organizations and had to adjust the way that I was managing those organizations, running those organizations day to day to meet the real demands of workers. They expect flexibility. The tenure is 2 years, at least in the nonprofit world. It's 2 years before somebody decides to move on to another position. So the 6 month period is a quarter of their time. If it matches what happens for people's tenure in state government, they expect benefits and paid time off. I mean, it has just changed. That is just the reality of where we are now. That was my only question, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Pinto?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the bill. New Mexico is in fire at will state.
I'm sorry, could you?
Madam Chair, Senator, New Mexico's at will state, in fire at will.
Madam Chair, that is correct.
So, Madam Chair and Senator, how come we have to go fit right in half?
Good question.
Why don't we just incrementally go from 12 to 11 and then see what happens? Why go all the way down to 6?
Madam Chair, Senator, so the State Personnel Act is what confers those rights upon an employee, and that's what this is proposing to amend. Why not go down to 11 months or 6 months? I think the 6 month is plenty of time, and I do think that it's much more in line with what private business does in regards to probation, and they do it for many of the same reasons that have already been stated, which is they become a member of the team, they have benefits that are conferred on them, The 6 month is just much more in line. And if, with all due respect for the work that we do, I think changing law is like growing a second head.
So, Madam Chair and Senator, the current climate right now, I think this is going to be very crucial. Um, I find it hard to support it because I think there's some proponents out there that after COVID that they think they have this luxury of kind of performing or yeah, have a luxury of saying, well, this is when I want to work. But a government and having those services available, I think is necessary, as Senator Scott mentioned. Because I still go to some of these state offices, and at lunchtime, nobody's there. They're like, oh, well, you can wait. Came in like 5 minutes to 12. Everybody's at lunch, so you have to wait there for an hour. But yet we are providing these services. I think it's I don't know where the perception is people to think that they have that luxury in that sense, especially when we're in state government trying to make sure our constituents and our New Mexicans have the ability to come in to a state office Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and really have the services that are to be provided. Someone's there to do the work. And maybe it's just also because of where I come from, the way my government performs too. People in the rural areas do not have the ability to just come back. Oh, come back in about an hour. Come back in or the next day because so and so is not here. It is detrimental to some of the services that we have that they get what they need that day, almost like how that they get seen, they get what they need and taken care of within a reasonable amount of time. And it seems like there's some that get very comfortable where they're at that they, but now it's very critical, and um, I don't know if it's the culture or it's just a very different time for some of our workers that come in with. I don't know if it's a generational thing, but it seems like we are having a real big issue all around. When I talk to several people that are supervisors about people coming in and just thinking, oh, well, I'm going to step out and go get whatever for me or pick up my child, knowing that you're supposed to be there. So it's, I don't know, for public employees, that's something critical that we need for.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Gallegos.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator and Lindsay. I did catch it. I was just going to ask, I want to go back for a moment. Lindsay, in your discussion, you're talking about 34, I believe, percent that did not stay, and then 75% that had quit. You go over those numbers again. Here's where my thought is. That's a lot of employees. I run a construction. We've got second and third generation employees where the grandpa, the dad, and the son work there. We're actually a fifth generation family that owns a company, but we don't get a lot of loss after the year. Where we get our loss is up close and up front. And a lot of it is too, Madam Chair and Senator and Lindsay, is the training. So since we do construction, we've got multiple hours in the first day of safety, just nothing but safety. They don't leave the facility. And the next day, if they're going to our crusher, and they've got, because of Mine Safety Act, they have days of training out there. And I'm just wondering on you're cutting the hours or cutting down to 6 months, how that's planned, or if you looked at affect those numbers. Because I think that in my reality,
where I live, what we do, that shorter period of time isn't going to give me the valuation I need to be able to see. I know we're talking about public employees, but you referred to private sector. I am private sector, and I don't think the 6 months gives me the amount that I need to look at. And I'm just wondering if you guys have researched those numbers, if in a year or where you're at now, if you cut it in half, what it would do to those insurance. And
Madam Chair and Senator, if I'm following, um, yes, it is a high percentage that choose to resign in the current 1 year probationary period. And you were right. So again, the numbers were 34% of new hires did not complete probation, and 75% of those chose to resign. So those are the numbers. Um, it is our hope that the retention will increase with this change and with getting some of the career status employee benefits sooner. There are a lot of things impacting vacancy rate in state government. Many of you have talked about concerns around scheduling, around available services and such, and vacancy rates are chronically high right now, which is really our biggest problem, and that is a result of salaries. That is a result of in some work units the culture, um, and so it's not all this. Um,
Madam Chair, Senator. So as has been said, it really is a different environment. I want to remind the committee that every day 10,000 people on average in the United States turn 65. The baby boom generation is retiring, and there's not enough employees to fill the positions. And so, we could try to equate it to COVID, but the reality is that our workforce is shrinking and the services that need to be provided are increasing. And so there are people, so employers are competing with one another. They're competing with one another for some of, and employees are looking for that kind of life work balance. They're working for pay. They're looking for benefits. And if you ask a young person who's in the workforce what is looking for in their jobs, it's going to be a variety of things. And the state has the ability to be an employer of choice. It used to be when I was younger that the state was an employer of choice because it had a really good retirement plan and it had excellent health care benefits. That's still the case. It's still good retirement plan and it's still good health care benefits for the most part. But the reality is that younger generations are looking for that flexibility. My daughter's worked remotely for 10 years now, and she does it because she prefers to work at home and have that flexibility. But she performs better than many people who come into the office every day. And so, the state is transitioning into ways that are going to have that kind of environment so that you can still get the customer service. And the customer service comes through programs like having a voice message that, or a phone, I don't mean a voice message, a phone system that tracks, right? It tracks the calls that are coming in. I cannot tell you how many times as a superintendent that I would have a representative or a senator or someone call me and say, this person has tried 20 times and they can't get anybody to answer the phone. Once I set it up so that I had a specific call center where I could monitor what calls were coming in and who was, I promise you that 9 times out of 10 they hadn't called. And so, people get frustrated and sometimes the number might be wrong. There's a variety of reasons it happens, but I do think for the most part that state agencies are really doing the best they can with a shortage of employees. And this is truly a way for us to have that one more, benefit for balancing out work and life.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair and Senator. I'll agree with you on maybe the number didn't go through. With the continued change of secretaries, I can't even get to a secretary without trying to find out who else I would contact to find that number. A lot of times I end up going into the regular website and get a person and then ask to speak to the secretary. So I know there's some of that goes on, but I guess my thing going back to these 34%, 75%, and if I understood right, other states around us already use this. Have we looked at any of the benefits they've received by doing this? Chair and Senator Lindsay?
Madam Chair and Senator, I have not looked at that.
Pardon?
I have not looked at that. We just simply looked at, the amount of the duration of probationary periods for comparison.
And I appreciate the honesty, Madam Chair and Secretary, Madam Chair and Senator and Lindsay. I would try to look into that because if this bill doesn't pass this year, you probably need good detail like that for next year. Just because the honest assessment is what someone else has done with this. But I do have, Madam Chair and Senator, my last question is, so my other hat is I'm on school board. Now, we don't hire and fire staff anymore, but I do know that it's really hardship on us thinking through a school year because it's different than the calendar year. And if you're cutting 6 months and down, how does that affect the school system? Madam Chair and Senator?
Madam Chair, Senator, you've actually asked me something that I actually have a lot of experience on because that's what I do as an attorney. I work within the School Personnel Act. And so keep in mind, though, as you know, teachers are different because they get a contract for the first year and then they get a contract for renewal the second year. And what the courts have said is that once you get that second contract and you accept it, you're basically a full-time, you're a permanent employee and now the due process rights. But you may remember a couple of years ago, and this is when I was still in the House, we passed legislation to get classified employees, non-licensed employees is what we call them in the schools, to get unlicensed employees a 1-year probation so that they were more in line with the state because the state has the 1 year. And so a custodian or a secretary
Food
or
service.
food service, those individuals can be terminated at any time. You don't have to wait till the end of the year. With the licensed employees, you actually have to go through the due process during the contract because now you're talking contract law. So it's really hard to compare apples and oranges with state employees. It's a whole different personnel act, state personnel act and the school employees, and very, very different. So I can't make that kind of comparison.
Thank you for that. That was my last question. I just wanted to make sure we weren't creating a conflict with the contract. No, we had a lawsuit that stated that we can't play with their contract. So, Madam Chair, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cynthia Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the times that I've supervised employees at the clinical law program, the law school, and at Enlace Comunitario, and to a more limited extent as an attorney, I've known way before 6 months whether this was going to work out. And so I think 6 months is plenty. I think it's great that it aligns us with the city because we lose a lot of employees to them. So I think this is a good idea, especially when people feel. I hadn't thought about what you said before about it makes them feel part of a team, but that's really true. When they pass the probationary period, it's a shift, and they start engaging more with common activities and parties and all of that. So when you're ready for a motion, Madam Chair, I'm happy to make one.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Senator Block for a second time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator, if this bill, in my opinion, and I don't know if you agree with it, you can tell me if I'm just out in left field, but this state of New Mexico, the state government is going to have some labor shortages, whether this is 6 months or a year probation period anyway. Am I out in left field on that, or am I?
Madam Chair, Senator, that's why I said there's 10,000 baby boomers at average in states that are retired. The generation that's retiring is needing a lot of assistance and um, a lot of different reasons, but the workforce is just, it's a workers workforce at the very moment. So you're right. This is not the one fix all for reducing the employment vacancy rate for state government, but we do believe, and that's why we're here today, that it's something that can.
Madam Chair and Senator, because I read somewhere where we had a high turnover rate um, even after the probationary period was over in New Mexico. I'm not sure what the numbers were, but I read a report somewhere that showed that I think the average state worker starting out, I don't know if it's the average state worker, but there was a pretty high percentage of state workers that didn't even last like 3 years. They quit or something like that. So the probationary period, in my opinion, whether it's 6 months or a year, and I like the 6 months. I don't think it really matters.
Madam Chair, Senator, it really just depends. I mean, we've read that CYFD struggles keeping people after their 6-month training program. And the reason being that people get into that job and they think it's going to be something that it's not. Or the stress of it is just really hard and they just decide this is not for me. I think the same thing happens with other employment jobs that are just really, we're asking really difficult things. And so it's not surprising to me. We know that teachers, and again, this is a whole different area, but 50% of the teachers that enter the workforce leave within the first 5 years. And so it's not uncommon for a high responsibility and high stress job to lose employees. They just self-select that this is not the thing for them. The other thing, and I think Senator Charlie had already mentioned it, is that the workforce isn't like it was when I was growing up, where people stayed in a job for a whole lifetime. My dad was a truck driver his whole life. And, he wouldn't have dreamed of doing some of the stuff that I've done. But now, if you can keep an employee for 2 years, you're in really good shape. If you keep them beyond that, then, you're doing something, really right, or they just really like what they do. But people move jobs and they move jobs for different reasons, pay and benefits, and sometimes it's just location.
And Madam Chair and Senator, I'll just close with these last 2 points. Is there are so many departments and so many different diversity of jobs where I think in some departments that turnover would be higher than others, like maybe the CYFD, because it can just be depressing and grind you down. Where other guys might just like working on roads and they're just happy being out there, outside and doing whatever. But I also just think it's a culture like you were talking about, and a work ethic. Some people that probably need a little bit of a push to improve their work ethic, in my opinion. But I I think I support this. I don't think it's going to matter. I think we're still going to be short-staffed in some of the rural areas, maybe that Senator Pinto was talking about, or some of the urban areas in my district. But 6 months doesn't really give you a gauge. Get a bunch of people still going through some training and trying to understand the organization. So I'll support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Senator Cynthia Lopez? There's a motion for a due pass from Senator Cynthia Lopez with a second. Nava, if you could please call the roll.
Senator Block,
Aye.
Senator Boone, Senator Charlie, Senator Gallegos, Senator Nava,
Yes.
Senator Pinto, Senator Scott,
Senator Cedillo Lopez,
Yes.
Senator Hickey,
Yes.
Senator Lopez. Yes. And just one final comment. It's a mix of what we need to do to help to retain employees. So, and it's a different generation. And if you talk to the young people, they have a whole different set of whatever they consider is work. And part of it, I believe, too, is listening, because they can do so much on this, and the expectation is, why can't they do it at work? And just talking to a few 19-year-olds recently opened my eyes a little. So thank you. You have a due pass recommendation by a vote of 6 to 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I have great respect for the younger generation's work ethic. I really do.
Is there anyone here for House Bill 77? Okay. That was Representative Thompson. We'll come back to that one.